We made this.
Welcome to the 75th episode of Pick a Disc. I'm your host Matt Latham, and this is the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And today, the disc picker is Kate from the Passing Notes project, and she's here to talk about the Metallica Blacklist, the full 5-hour marathon that is the cover project for charity that Metallica directed, which involves a load of people, a lot of famous names coming together to do cover versions of songs from the Black Album. And it fits in with the premise of the show, where someone brings something in to talk about for whatever reason. And yeah, we go through the songs and we pick which ones we liked and which ones we didn't. And it's a very interesting chat. And yeah, you'll hear a bit more about that just a bit later on after I do all the social blogging and stuff. So yeah, so if you like what you hear, if you're listening for the first time, feel free to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. You just search for Pick a Disc, and if you see the logo, it's probably me, unless there are people claiming to be me. I don't know why people want to claim to be Pick a Disc. I mean, it's not an anthropomorphic person. It's a podcast, and yeah, the idea of someone impersonating Pick a Disc is very weird. And I don't know why I've gone down this tangent, but anyway, yeah, if you find anything with Pick a Disc on there, it is potentially me. In places, there's even parts of the internet which have the original 2015 version of the show, but none of the episodes work anymore. Anyway, I'm rabbiting on. Feel free to join the Discord. The link is in the show notes that you'll find attached to whatever podcast app that you have. And don't forget that We Made This have a Patreon that you can also subscribe to if you want to support us or any of the shows on We Made This. And with that, I can't think of anything else left to say apart from we are 3/4 of the way to episode 100, and that blows my mind. But of course, we've still got 25 episodes to go through, and at least one episode you're about to listen to, and that episode is The Blacklist with Kate from Passing Notes. So, with me rabbiting on, let's talk to Kate. I think this is quite exciting that there's not actually anyone watching us on Instagram while we chat, Kate, so...
Oops.
Yeah. unless actually, I just sort of checked my phone and accidentally live streaming by mistake. No, it's not. Yeah, so Kate from Passing Notes project is with me. He's the guest for this episode. So she contacted me a while ago saying that she has an idea for like a crossover idea based on the thing that we're going to talk about today, and I was like, yeah, let's do that. I'm not familiar with it. I'm not familiar with the original album that we're talking about, and for longer term listeners might laugh at the fact that there's about 5 hours of music that I had to listen to. A lot of the songs in general very much surpass the Latham limit, which for anyone who's not listened before is the term that John Horrible mentioned about my dislike of long songs. So this is a
so post rock's not a goer for you then, Matt?
Yes, no, not at all, not at all. So I know for a fact that someone's probably, because then the album / thing in question was was open before we recorded, so people probably saw that and immediately laughed, going, "Oh yeah, so Matt's gonna have to." I'm pretty sure Colin from Previous This Month's Issue / Reading Music, who commented on Instagram, said, "Oh, this is gonna be great." He probably laughed at the amount of long songs I've had to listen to. But so without beating around the bush, Kay, why don't you tell the listeners the disc / playlist that you've picked for us to talk about?
The efforts are appreciated, by the way. This is the recent cover versions project that Metallica did, called the Metallica Blacklist. Series of cover versions from a wide variety of different bands, artists, and it was a project done with the proceeds going to charity. From having a quick cursory look at Reddit, opinion has varied quite significantly, and I kind of half expected that. And I think for that reason, I appreciated the opportunity to just give it a go and just see what you thought and what other people potentially might think as well. The nature of these things is that it's so subjective, isn't it? There are people out there that won't like the picks that I choose, and that's completely fine. In terms of my listening to Metallica, it's been a little bit more secondhand, if I'm honest. My older brothers were very into them, and we had a lot of this album playing in the car, and a lot of Kill 'Em All playing in the car as well. So it wasn't initially for me at the time when I was, I don't know, 8, but in my older and hopefully wiser years, a lot of the tracks have grown on me, I'd say. And yeah, I'm looking forward to choosing picks with you of our preferred track lists.
I mean, one of the things that I've always said, and it's pretty much said at the very start of every episode where I do my kind of single, I do like It's Me on My Own, just introducing the album, introducing the episode, which I always do after edits. And the tagline for the podcast is, this is Pick a Disc, the podcast where people pick a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And 99.9 times out of 10, it's people, I quite like this album because I want to talk about this album stuff. And this might be one of the first instances where it's slightly different from that, where it's not just a case you want to talk about it, you want to actually kind of compare the different ones. And this might be slightly different to what people who have listened to a few more episodes might be used to, but technically it is the premise of the podcast, and I'm quite looking forward to the kind of unique nature of the actual thing itself. So in that case, so what's going to be slightly different is that we're going to go. What's usually different is that we usually don't have time to go through every single song on an album, because I usually let the guest dictate what they want to talk about, and kind of it's more about the emotional connections to the songs that they want to talk about over others. And if there was time, I always think that we should talk for everyone. But because of the nature of this, we're going to go through every single song on the
briefly.
Briefly. Technically, there's 12 songs. And the conversation might flip between different versions of that. But so eventually, the track listing bit's going to be the main bulk of this. But before we get there, I want to quickly say my disclosure: Metallica is, I pretty much knew only of Enter Sandman and I think Master of Puppets. Enter Sandman because quite a few nights I have probably spent at Eddie's in Birmingham, and or very similar kind of rock clubs because of the friends I go to, and Enter Sandman was usually the Metallica song that was played in like rock discos. So that was, to this day, actually I still don't know all the words. To actually know all the words.
I'm not sure I do either, particularly.
I think Master Puppets was on a Guitar Hero game, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, Metallica is part of the pop culture zeitgeist, so I know of Metallica, I just don't know any of the songs, and quite a few of the songs that people might know and probably be shocked that I've never heard before are probably mainstays for people. So my choices are probably going to be more controversial than yours, I think, because about 11 tracks this album I've never heard before.
Yeah.
So I never agree with them. And Metallica had only been kind of like a punchline for me, places where many festivals I go to are kind of smaller indie festivals. It goes like, who do you think you're going to announce and stuff? And there's always the one person going Metallica. So it's probably so it's like a 500 cat festival, and goes, who do you think our headliner is? And it's like some bloke next door, like a local artist next door, and people just go Metallica, and he goes, couldn't afford him. And
no one can.
Yeah. So Metallica's always been the kind of band that everyone seems to mention in festival lineup suggestions. And also, I'm not going to go too much into detail, but there was also kind of the punchline for anything to do with music piracy. Because Metallica was always the
Napster and
there was always the kind of thing behind them. But so that's pretty much my disclosure of them themselves. Metallica, I'm not going to go too much into details. Metallica are a band, probably I've seen the term Big Four, I think, being used in terms of metal bands. I can't for the life of me remember what the other three are, and I can feel people listening stare daggers at me, and my kind of naivety with the metal genre.
It's all right. I wouldn't know. On the festival's point. Sorry, go on.
I want to say one of them's Anthrax. Again, possibly, but So on the festival point, sorry?
On festival's point, I actually saw Metallica at Leeds, and this was at a point where I was still on the fence about them. And I came out of it a fair bit more of a Metallica fan than I was before. They put on a brilliant show, to give due credit to them. And they were just in good, wry, humorous form. I think James Hetfield said something about something bit sort of forgivably arrogant about them stepping out of a limo or something. I can't remember. But they put on an excellent show. Very maximal, balloons flying out of nets in the sky afterwards, pyrotechnics on certain cues of Enter Sandman. good fun. Jolly good fun. I don't know if I felt like that because immediately beforehand it was Mumford and Sons, which is obviously completely different.
That's a very interesting mix. But then again, it was Leeds, Reading and Leeds are. It's I think it's a festival that tries to cater for quite a few people. I mean, if you said you was at Download and then Mumford and Sons were before Metallica, I was like, who the hell? So the booking agent must have lost the bet. The booking agent must have lost the bet.
Out of the crowd. Can you imagine?
I think Daphne Celeste would have a better reaction at Download than Mumford and Sons. I think, but I mean, I think they're kind of like perhaps one of the few bands that will probably be able to headline kind of big, like they'll go straight to the top of, I think either Glastonbury had the balls to try and like, then I think Glastonbury probably more indie, but they kind of like, they're like immediately one of those bands that like say, oh, they're going to be top of the bill immediately. So if they're on a festival lineup, immediately going to headline one of the days and stuff. But so the usual general discussion in the note. So I want to briefly talk about the kind of nature of the cover album as a whole and how it applies for this one, because I've seen certain things, certain commenters online saying this feels like a vanity project, mainly because Metallica were quite deeply involved in the production of it. They actually guest on quite a few of the covers themselves later on. But I think, as you said earlier, it's to charity. I think it's for charity and it's in the whole. So it's not, I don't think it's much of an ego. I think it is kind of like them either trying to keep themselves busy during lockdown or pandemic and everything. And I think cover albums as a whole general, I think some of them are quite interesting to do. I mean, do you, apart from these, do you have any like albums where someone's covered a whole album or an album covers that you know of?
It seems to have become quite an emerging thing recently because Paul McCartney did one with his most recent album. There was McCartney 3 Imagined, and it's unlike what we're about to talk about. There's not loads of different cover versions of the same one. It's very carefully curated. You get that sense, and the variety is massive. So you have kind of soul, pop, R&B takes like Dominic Fike did of The Kiss of Venus. You have this kind of funky one that Khruangbin did. You have probably my favourite one on there, which is by Phoebe Bridgers. And she's also done a version on this, incidentally, which I loved. More on that later. Yeah, it seems to be an emerging thing. And I've noticed that with Brittany Howard, she's done that with her most recent album as well. I think it seems like there's a very careful balance to be struck about having quite faithful takes in with very inventive, very imaginative takes, and having that also work as a cohesive whole. It is interesting going back to this, trying to kind of keep both of those requirements, I think, in mind.
And I think I think that particularly with kind of tribute albums as well, like that are kind of covers. There's a great kind of compilation of. Oh, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I've spoken about it on a past episode because it's the Adam Schlesinger who passed away due to COVID, I think quite early on in the pandemic.
Oh.
He was the lead singer of Fountains of Wayne, and he's one of these who's, I think he wrote The Wonders That Thing You Do, and he was one of the chief songwriters of the Craziest Girlfriend TV series. And there was like basically to raise money, there was like all these kind of pop punk indie pop bands that kind of covered a load of songs that he's done on song. So you got those kind of like, which is kind of like this, but I think it's not actually a collective album. It was more like a collection, like a compilation of his greatest hits covered by someone else. You also got and I know you also got kind of like one person covering a whole album. Dan O'Dell, who was the host of episode 60 on the Blink-182 album we talked about, he did a cover of Enema of the State, but he did the whole album, so he's done an acoustic emo version of that. And on the same level as Blink-182, Colin Green, who's one of my favourite artists, did a kind of drone pop version of Dude Ranch. It pretty much changed the whole nature, and it's pretty much like it transforms the album from kind of bratty, kind of immature boys to almost introspective depression, and it's the same songs.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I want to listen to this. I mean, I think I only managed to listen to the whole thing once, because as I said earlier, it was quite a lot of chunks, and I kind of listened to it in different orders. So I thought, depending on how much time I had, I thought, okay, I'll go through certain songs first because there's not many of them, and I'll try and tackle I'll tackle other songs later on.
That's fine.
Yeah, and I think there's two schools of thought when it comes to cover albums, and I think this has both. You've got a kind of transformative aspect where someone takes it and tries to rearrange the whole thing and make something a lot more original, and then you've got some which appear to be bands just doing
very faithful versions.
Yeah, very faithful versions. And so which before I make my other point, which one of those two do you prefer in terms of cover version? Do you prefer something the kind of like very faithful, or would you prefer something that's a lot more transformative? Or
it's interesting because in the list that I decided on, there is a mixture of both. There are some that were very, very original that I loved, and there is one that I'll mention later that made me very angry.
Okay.
And likewise, I think with the more faithful takes, I think what decided it for me in terms of whether I liked it or was a bit less fussed about it was just whether it kind of did something original with the spirit of it, or if it amplified certain things about the original and made it great. Just the details of that, honing in on that, helped me make that decision.
I wouldn't perhaps usually mind, but I think what kind of lets this down, I think, is the frequency of the frequency and the weighting of the different amount of songs that have been covered and stuff, and we'll probably get to a bit more details. So for example, it opens up with Enter Sandman, and there's about 7 or 8 versions of it, and you get to the point where it's like you get to about 4 or 5 in, and it's like, okay, and then you suddenly have Weezer come in, and it doesn't sound like Weezer; it sounds like Weezer doing a play pretending to be Metallica, and it kind of it loses something of the points, and we'll get to Nothing Else Matters later on, but the same thing happens there as well. And and it gets to the point where I'm like, okay, in isolation these will probably be more well accepted, but in the sequencing in how they are sequenced, I think it kind of loses it, which loses something. So some songs get lost in the mix, and and I can't see anyone sitting through all this all the way through on a one sitting. So you're going to get some stuff and some interpretations of the songs lost in it. And I think the weighing of the faithful, or the kind of more unique things, it's very strange. I think it's quite strange. It's the decision to have this listing where you go through all the versions one after the other is an interesting decision. I think it keeps the original album sequencing probably, but it does mean that it can feel like a bit of a test of patience. But we'll get into that a bit later on. Have you got any other thoughts on that before we move on? Or?
I do have a question. Thinking particularly about how many cover versions of certain tracks there are, do you think that it would have been better if for each track it was capped at a certain amount? So like 3 and 3 only versions of Nothing Else Matters, or 3 and 3 versions only of Sad But True? Yeah,
because I think what happens is that it feels as if Metallica have gone to a bunch of people. Oh, do you want to cover one of our songs? And then they say, okay, then. But they're not told them what, and then not told them what they're going to do. And they've come back with goes, right, so I've asked about 50 people, and so we've got 25 versions of Nothing Else Matters, and crap. It's like,
exactly. I bet you that's
it's like, goes, why has no one picked of Wolf and Man? Crap, we need someone to do a Wolf and Man. There's no one like a Wolf and Man. We've got 500 Nothing Else Matters, but no. And so basically, because crap. I know Rodrigo y Gabriel owes me a favour. Get them to knock up a Struggle Within, because no one's submitted Struggle Within. I think.
Yeah, they can do it. They're reliable. They know what they're doing.
I've not read in too much into the background of this, so it might not be that at all, but I do get the strong impression it was a case of do us a cover, which song do you want us to do? You pick, and then not realising that perhaps some people are going to be picking the more famous songs and then completely
Right.
missing the album tracks. And I think
Exactly.
and I got a feeling, again, it might not be that, but I've got a strong feeling it feels so much like that, which is why you've got a couple of songs with only one cover version in it, one version of it. And it must be a case of them chasing up someone to say, do you want to do this? And like, can I do Enter Sandman? No, you can't do Enter Sandman. But can I do Nothing Else? No, you can't do Nothing Else Matters. Why not? Because everyone else has done Nothing Else Matters. The cheeky girls have submitted a version of Nothing Else Matters.
Sacked.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
No more.
So, I think that's what happened, and that's kind of bitten them in the arse a bit in terms of the weighting of this. Particularly when you got Nothing Else Matters, when you've got about 8 of them that are over 6 minutes long as well, and like, but we'll get to that eventually. So we're going to go through. Yeah. So we're going to go through the different tracks that we've got. So I'm going to be queuing up Spotify to help me get through this. So the album begins with what I've discovered online might be the most famous or the most popular metal song of all time. It's the one on the album I've heard of, which is Enter Sandman.
Yeah, it's the one that every guitar student learns. It's probably one of the first songs they learn along with Smoke on the Water. My brother can probably testify to that. He's a guitar teacher, so.
Is the case the guy goes, oh God, I'm sick of that song. He probably be the song. I can envision pretty much any Metallica diehard like disliking the song. It has that kind of thing to it, I think. But I saw a tweet which says, can you imagine the most metal song of all time, the most famous metal song, being about soothing a child to sleep? It's quite a positive, gentle song in terms of lyricals when you think about it. The imagery is quite not unsettling but settling in terms of, it's like, oh no, the monster in your bed's not going to kill you, is that thing, but with a kind of gruff voice on
menacing.
It. Yeah. But on this one we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 6 different versions of Enter Sandman from Alicia Cara and The Warning, Mac DeMarco, Ghost, Juanes, I'm not sure, Rina Sawayama, and Weezer. Yeah. So I'm gonna let you choose which versions you want to talk about first.
Okay, my definite choice was Rina Sawayama. Reason I chose her version is it's one of the more original picks that I have, but there are a lot of very faithful elements to Metallica sound there, the kind of things that made the original track great. The pace was there, the drum programming, my God, I loved it. Just that whole kind of just strong kick, and then the kind of little embellishes and little fills and stuff. Loved it. The only thing that would have made that skyrocket to the moon for me, it did land in the stars, would either if it had real drums or mixing wise, and I'm aware that there'll be people more expert than me with this, mixing wise, if there was less high end and it was crisper. I got the feeling the producer was trying to go for a Rammstein type thing, and I appreciated that and enjoyed that. I think maybe some tweaks with that side of things would have made it land more there. But it kind of felt like a bit more like a love letter to the track, including samples from the original as well that were kind of glitched up. And her voice is incredible. And you can tell with Rina's body of work anyway that she loves metal, she loves R&B, she loves pop, but she mixes it together in a way that is completely 100% original, and I love that.
Last year, I think it was my third favorite album of last year was Soyama, and it's like a love letter to the year 2000 with like the combination of like R&B. It's like Mystique meets Evanescence meets Christina.
I thought that. Yeah.
It's great. It's like you've gone back in time. It's like you've gone back in time, and all the top 10 in like the year 2000 was just like mushed together in one album.
Yeah, it's interesting. My sixth form, they had a jukebox, and basically the reason why I loved Sawayama so much is that it reminded me of all of the picks sort of from between 2002 2004 that were on there. There was Metallica, there was TLC, there was Britney. It just all works. And yeah, that's why I love that and love her, and I think she's a genius. So I may be a little bit biased with this pick, but even if I wasn't, I'd still pick it.
Yeah, it was actually Rina Sayao's version was the one that I picked to open up my list as well. Very similar reasons as well. I mean, I say my ears aren't. I've said this podcast before. My ears aren't tuned to figure out to realise what's fake drums and what's real drums and all kind of that stuff. But I quite like how much it sounds like it belongs on Sayama. I think perhaps if part of me kind of wishes that she incorporated a bit more. She had sometimes in the album she kind of switches it between like R&B and then suddenly you get stings of like metal, like particularly in the song Excess, where like it's a Mystique song when suddenly that gets invaded by Evanescence or Linkin Park in the stings and stuff. And part of me kind of wished that she'd inverse flip that in this one, where like suddenly R&B would suddenly kick in. And I think I mean, it's not detracting what the version that's there now. I just kind of wish that she'd been a bit more braver to incorporate more of her sound into. I mean, then again, it does sound like it does sound like her, but I think because it's like putting this 100% metal mixed with slight layer of pop in there. I think she probably could have gotten away with adding a bit more of a R&B style melody to it to replace some of the guitars at points. But other than that, I can't fault it. It's like a perfect fit for her. She's working on a second album, and I think she's going to end up being a lot more famous than she already is.
Yeah,
a lot more famous.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, and it's like a match made in heaven. I think it was. So that's my pick as well. I think I want to briefly mention with the Weezer version is like what I alluded to earlier. Is that it sounds like Weezer are pretending to be Metallica rather than saying it's like a Weezer song.
Yeah, I see what you mean about that. It seems like they were the most faithful both to Metallica and to themselves. I kind of respect that. It probably, for similar reasons to you, I wouldn't necessarily have picked it either, because it's it's not telling us anything new really. But I didn't hate it. It was all right. Are there any other honourable mentions for you?
I think the Ghost version, it morphs into like a similar sounding song, but I think it gets points for effort. Gets points for effort. To try and start doing something different. I think it's the first time where I think the previous two sound a bit too similar to the original style, the Alyssa Cara and the Mac DeMarco might as well just be...
Agreed.
Yeah, Mac DeMarco is doing a James Hetfield impression for most of it. But I
found that funny though.
Yeah,
I have to admit, I found that funny. Like, I wouldn't choose it on artistic merit, but I like the fact that he kind of went full 100% Christmas ham with the James Hetfield impression.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
little baby. And then there was a Zappa meltdown at the end, which I loved.
I could probably see that. I mean, I might be the only person in the world that does this, but I think sometimes with the song, particularly more than one vocalist, if you're singing along, I don't know whether... this is me listening to this live, not live, but me listening to this on the podcast. I'm not going to edit this out because I'm going to put this on. This is going to be on record. Where perhaps when you listen, when you're singing along something, your voice kind of does an impression of the person singing. So I'm a big fan. One of my favourite songs of all time is Five's "Keep On Moving," which is one of the best pop songs of 1999. And you can fight me on that if anyone disagrees. But there's about 3 different vocalists on it. And whenever it gets sung, like the first song, I can't remember the names as well, but it's like my voice automatically goes to "What got to do with," but my voice automatically goes raspy when singing along with it. And then the second verse is, I think, Richie, the guy who dated Billy Piper. But then it's like he's got very much high pitched and even singing along. I'm like, feels like I should be, and like your voice changes. It's like a very crap impression, and I kind of get that Mac DeMarco is probably doing something similar to that. So he's probably sung along to it and then just started going through. He's probably spent his youth singing along to it, but instead of singing it as Mac DeMarco, he's probably gone, "We're off to Neverland." So he's probably done that. So if anyone else does that, please let me know I'm not alone, or if I will bask in my weirdness on my own. So. Okay, so I'll concede that he's done that, but yeah, unless there's any other mentions of Enter Sandman before we move on.
Let's move on. Yeah.
So okay. So we're next to Sad But True, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 versions of Sad But True, which include Sam Fender with a live version, Jason Isbell and the 400 Unit, the Mexican Institute of Sound featuring La Perla and Jera MX, St. Vincent, White Reaper, and YB. So, which ones did you want to talk about? So which ones jumped out at you?
My pick was St. Vincent. It appealed to all of my secret, not so secret by the time this is published, 9 Inch Nails enjoyment. Just the beat is just, I think anyone that knows me knows that I am a magpie for details with music, and rhythm is probably the thing I gravitate towards the most. And I just like the beat, I like the feel of it. It sounds, again, with similar reasons to Rena, there was a spirit of the original. It amplified all the kind of elements that made it great, that kind of feel with the rhythm. But it's, you can tell it's Annie, you can tell it's St. Vincent, just like with Rena's version of Enter Sandman, you can tell it's Rena.
I've not really listened to much St. Vincent, which probably surprised a couple of people because I think there's a lot of crossover with the kind of music that I quite like. From what I've vaguely heard from St. Vincent, and I keep meaning to keep giving this stuff a listen to. I liked her version, but it's not the one I picked. It's not the one I would have picked. So this is cool. So we got to the second song before we deviated, because my pick was the Jason Isbell one.
Yeah, that was honourable mention for me.
Yeah, and again, I think that's because it stood out. It feels like, I think it comes from the back of Sam Fender's version. Feels like it's quite transformative and does something different with it, and it reminds me so much of when I used to listen to the Live Lounge on Radio 1. Because it was like a live recording of it. But the Jason Isbell kind of turns it into kind of like a, I've just described it as crunchy country. There's like a crunch to it. There's like a kind of distorted crunch, and it's just nice to kind of listen. And I think it works well works well when you listen to it off the back of kind of the Rina Soria's and Sandman, and it goes into a different genre. And I think a lot of my kind of, and this is probably spoilers for the kind of stuff that I'll go through later on, it kind of transforms it and sounds different to Metallica's version, because I think it highlights something I think a good cover version can do, is that if you can kind of transform a song into something that sounds different, but then still sounds different with no trace of the original, but you can still detect that it's a cover. And I think the cover's successful. Yeah. And again, and as well, I think Jason Isbell's not a genre I listen to that much at all. So I think it's quite well that it kind of stands out.
Yeah, I agree. I think my honourable mentions would have been Jason and Sam, for those reasons. YB's version I like less, but I like the change of pace and how they arranged the chorus. It kind of had that sort of feeling of being in a monster truck in an arena with massive wheels, careening over lots of hills with a massive crowd. The other versions didn't grab me. Meh. Royal Blood, meh. White Reaper, meh.
Yeah, I actually put the word meh for Royal Blood. I've never clicked with them.
Me too.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those weird things where people seem to assume that, I think you quite like Royal Blood, but I've just never, I don't know, there's just something about them. It's just something about them I've just never really clicked with, and I think it's kind of switched off a bit with that one. But so moving on to track 3, which is Holier Than Thou, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're getting down to the kind of whittling of the numbers and the weightings a bit. And what at this point I think as well is that I think the compilation at the moment it's getting to a point where it's realising that you don't need loads of different versions of something, and this fact gets undercut by the next song. But so I think we got Biffy Clyro, The Chats, Off Pup, and Corey Taylor. Yeah. And there's a nice, interesting narrative with some of these songs that I'll bring up in a second. But which ones jump out to you?
This is the one where I went faithful, and I went for Corey Taylor's version. I think just really, I was grabbed from the beginning. There's this whole kind of thing where he's sort of singing to the side like, holier than thou, and then there's 4 clicks and it's straight in, no messing about. As I say, it's probably the most faithful take, but this was one I felt that amplified the elements, the DNA of the song that made it great, particularly the drums, the pace, the chorus. I kind of, from listening, comparing it to the original, I felt like those were important to keep. And that was my filter, I suppose, compared to the others. For honourable mentions, I would have gone for the Chats. They're Aussie band, super fun punk, simple, straightforward, beautiful. Ultimately, I didn't feel like this song needed a lot of embellishment, really. I appreciated its simplicity, and I think that was my filter here. Similar reasons for Pup. The one I felt that slightly more meh about was Biffy, sadly. I really liked the arrangement, but there was something about it that felt too glossy for me. I don't know if it was in the production or in the vocal production for Simon Neil's vocals or what, but it didn't grab me like the others did.
Yeah, I've never really given Biffy Clyro much time to listen to, so I can't really like talk about the band that much myself. But I'm assuming I've made the assumption that they've pretty much turned it into what sounds like one of their songs. So it sounds like a Biffy Clyro song, which was so it has that kind of transformative element, which I appreciate. But again, I think the interesting thing with me is that there's the middle, so the Chats, Off and Pup, I think have a very kind of unique thing throughout the whole compilation, in that there's a nice, interesting narrative you can apply to the three of them in sequence. My pick was the Chats version.
Nice.
If someone on this podcast told me that I'm going to pick this album from 1982 from a band called the Chats, and this was on there, I'd believe you, because it sounds like it's a remastered version of a song from 1982. It sounds so it has that kind of punk, kind of like it's got that kind of punk scrappy. Someone like it was originally recorded in a garage, but it was like recorded in a garage, but someone would hidden on the side with some more high tech equipment that they've hidden for about 30 years, and then come back with the kind of this high quality version of a 1982 garage rock song, and. The Off, and I like the Off version as well, but the Off version, if you told me it was a 90s punk band covering a song by the Chats called Howlier Than Thou, I would believe you as well, because it sounds like they're doing a cover version of the Chats version.
Oh, for sure, yeah. This is a bit meta, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, the Pup version, because Pup's quite recent band as well, but and they're into kind of like modern pop punk type of thing as well. They're very good live as well.
Oh, great!
I think, and their version sounds like, and I'm going back to the kind of compilation that I said about the Ashton Schlesinger one, and the Pup version sounds like it belongs on a Bandcamp compilation for charity. And if Pup said, "Oh, this is our version of the Chats Howlier Than Now," again, I would believe them. So so there's like a nice sequential. It's a weird. I hope people understand what I'm saying. It's a very weird thing where it sounds like the covering an older version. Like, again, like you could argue that the original Howlier Than Now sounds like Metallica doing a version of the Chats, of this punk song, and it was when I listened to that, I listened to those three in sequence again, and it's quite nice, and also the Chats version's only 2.5 minutes, so it's. It suits me to the T. And I think this is like the Howlier Than Now, and I think as a whole, it's a lot more enjoyable to listen to those 5 songs because of that kind of building on each other and how different they are and stuff. And the Corey Taylor version, Slipknot, one of those bands that I've never liked or really could get into, and although I do have a massive soft spot for that CMFT song that he did with Tech Nine and everything, which the internet says is an absolute load of rubbish, and it is, but it's a fun rubbish. It's like watching The Room. It's like watching The Room. There's the music version of The Room, but Corey Taylor trying to do chopper rap. It's
I've watched that already. I've not heard it, but
if you ever see CMFT by Corey Taylor, it's the Room of kind of rock rap. It's great.
Okay.
So, as I was saying, from Trimming the Fat, we go back to 7 songs for The Unforgiven, where we have Cage the Elephant, Michelle Delany, Divine Shore Police, Diet Sig, Flatbush Zombies featuring DJ Scratch, Hat Ash, Jose Madero, and Moses Sumney. So we go back to 7 now. So, so which ones jumped out at you?
Moses Sumney by a considerable margin. It was a thoughtful version that I felt captured the spirit of the lyrics beautifully and very sensitively. I think what was my filter here versus the others was that his was the take that I believed vocally more than anyone else's. And I loved the bass at the beginning and the kind of sort of slow burn feeling, that it was like a very gradual build. In terms of honourable mentions, Vishal Dadlani's arrangement was pretty cool. I'd be intrigued to find out what the Hindi rap section means.
Oh, was it Hindi? I was trying to figure out what the I couldn't figure out what the language was, and I didn't know if it was Hindi.
I think it is. I kind of guessed that it might be, but so then I went to have a quick look into it on the internet and make sure, and it turned out it is. So thankfully, I wasn't as grabbed by Diet Six version. Normally, I like that kind of genre of music, but I wasn't grabbed by this version. Elements in KG Elements version were okay, but along with Flat Zombies, Hat Ash, and Jose Madero, I thought their versions were super meh. Like Moses, some of these versions slayed all of them for me.
Yeah, for these, for example, I think Cage Elephant are a band that the festivals I was talking about earlier, that I joke, oh, Metallica headlining, and you go, no, and it'll be the case that Cage Elephant will be in the position where they'll be headlining these kind of festivals that you make the Metallica joke about. Again, Cage Elephant are a band I'm not too much iffy with.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, the Moses Sumney version, I think, is the first real victim of fatigue. Of fatigue, because it's right at the end of it all. I think at the point it comes back from Jose Madero and the Hot Ash, it just is a point where I'm like, you've listened to the same, you're ready to move on to another song, and I think the sequencing kind of goes against it. So by the time I got to Moses Sumney, I kind of like switched off, I think and mentally I think you get to a point where you're waiting to move on. So I didn't really think much of the Moses Sumney version. Funny enough, though, Dice Sig is the one I picked. Yeah, nice. So it's a polar opposite to yourself and stuff. Yeah. But and again, I think people who know me, it's pretty much my ideal genre of music. They transform it into a genre that it's not exactly a genre, but it's a name of something that I've spoken to about on other podcasts called bubble grunge, where it's the like the Bieber Doobie style kind of 90s grunge mixed with bubblegum pop hybrid. Yeah. It's that kind of nice kind of expansive sound like that. Well, quite vast variety of sound, and I quite like it how it transforms. How it kind of transforms it into this kind of song that I really quite I wouldn't mind listening to. Considering it's nearly 5 minutes long, it's 5 minutes long, and they're usually a lot more kind of quick, snappy. Like 2.5 minute, 3 minute kind of songs. It's quite interesting to hear them go that route as well. I did quite like the Flatbush Zombies. And going into the kind of the almost notorious B.I.G. East Coast rap style sound and stuff. I did quite like that. But I say I think Dice C was my pick, which so
cool.
So next we go to Wherever I May Roam, and there's not a lot less to choose from here. So you've got J Balvin, Chase and Status featuring Black Road G, the Neptunes, and John Pardy. So and before we go mention it, I'd like to say the fact that this 7-minute original song gets cut down by about half its length by most of these covers, which automatically makes it better in my book. So which ones did you quite like on these?
I would say for this one, I was between two versions, and this was probably one of the tougher ones to pick for me. What ended up being my honourable mention was Chase and Status. I liked the kind of rap take on it. I thought it was refreshing. What I went for was John Pardy because of how lush the arrangements was. I think it's interesting, actually, how well a lot of Metallica's sounds and arrangements and melodies lend themselves to folk. And this was kind of more of a folky country music, Middle Eastern-ish take. Country music's not normally my thing, and by rights this should be too much, but I really enjoyed all the theatrics and the big kind of metal / folky arrangements. I thought that it worked really well. In super meh for me was Neptunes. I think just putting a breakbeat on the original is lazy.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
think I can't remember which site it was, but there was like a ranking each one of them worst to best. And I can't,
yes, I've read that. Yeah.
I don't know if the Neptunes was last, but it was definitely near the bottom. And I'm pretty sure is it actually Hatfield that does the vocals on that version, or is it someone who sounds like? Or it's not, or it wasn't Mac DeMarco doing his impression again, was it? Or I thought it was him. I thought it was Hatfield.
Yeah.
I think it might. Yeah, and yeah, it's quite lazy, and yeah, I just didn't. I liked the change of genre from John Pardy, because I think particularly he had the previous two kind of rap ones, but again, it's 7 minutes long. It's closer to the one, and the one I went for was the J Balvin version.
Oh, cool! Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah, it's quick. It's quick. It's simple, but also it has the Colombian. I think is it Colombian or Spanish?
I'm not sure. I think it's Colombian.
Yeah,
I might be wrong, but
yeah. Again, I think I'm wrong, but particularly because it has the kind of like kind of rap break in the language, which I think is quite good. I found really quite nice to listen to. And Chasing Status, I quite like that version, but again, Chasing Status are a band / group, or I'm not exactly sure. If they punch me in the street, I wouldn't know it's Chasing Status. They punch me in the street. That's the the test. That's the usual test. Is if someone famous punched you in the street, would you recognise them? Chasing Status are one of those I wouldn't recognise. But I do know that I feel like they've been trying to revive the early noughties garage for about the last decade. Trying to pervade and stuff, and I do appreciate them trying, and I quite like how they're trying to incorporate some of that into their version. But I think the J Balvin version, I think, kind of edges it just by it feeling so different. Different, and again, my common thread is the transformative aspects of it, and I think this is probably the most different from the original, and it's probably why I picked it.
Same. Right.
So, Don't Tread on Me. Yeah, and also Don't Tread on Me the next song. Very cheap go there. So we have versions. So there's not that many for this one. There's three versions. So they've got Sebastian, Portugal featuring The Man featuring Aaron Beam, and Volbeat. So which one did you like out of these?
Right. I'll tell you first the one I picked, and then also the one that made me the saddest, because it had potential and then it just kind of fell flat.
Yeah.
For me. The one I picked was the Portugal the Man version. It was a close call between that and the Volbeat version. What clinched it for me was that Portugal the Man kept the West Side Story quote in at the beginning, and the bonkers tempo changes, and there was all these kind of crazy elements. Like, what was that crazy out-of-tune xylophone in the background? Just at the very kind of side of your ear shot. I felt kind of taken on a bit more of an odyssey with this one, and that was essentially why I picked it. The version that made me sad was the Sebastian mashup thing. Don't Tread on Else Matters. I thought, because I like this sort of super funky, Frenchy, glitchy goodness that he and Justice and Daft Punk, of course, do. And it started for me brilliantly for that reason. I completely got into the rhythm, like da 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 bit, and then the transition to they were trying to transition to the orchestral version of Nothing Else Matters, and the way it started, even that started out great. Like the long strings kind of fitted in really, really well underneath it, and you could get that kind of build of tension. But then when the beat out, it just lost its steam, like it just sank like a flat cake. The transition was just messy as well. Like, I don't know if it was that kind of challenge of trying to mash together two songs that have really quite conflicting tempos, but I think it lost its way after the kind of halfway point, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, like the first 2.5 minutes of that Sebastian cover is really not. I really like that. I'm like, oh, this might be my pick and stuff. And
same.
Yeah, and because it sounds so much like something Adam and the Ants would have done in the 80s. Yeah, it's there's like a very kind of weird, kind of like lo-fi kind of thing. Like, for example, Adam Ant, particularly in the early, the late 70s late 70s, where you'd have like, it's so lo-fi where it is sounded like it was recorded in a garage, sounded in a carriage on a tape in another room, and it has that kind of element to it. I'm like, man, I'm really enjoying this. And then it morphs into, well, I'm assuming it's prepping us for Nothing Else Matters, for the onslaught, for the onslaught of Nothing Else Matters. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's just had, I don't know. It's kind of really gutting where like this nice kind of 2-minute bit where it's like, oh, this is like kind of very niche, very transformative very transformative. No, I'm going to be sick of saying that word myself in a minute. Aspects of it where it's like it's like this kind of thing. I'm like, oh, if a lot of Sebastian stuff sounds like this, I might go and listen. I might listen to more stuff because I'm a massive fan of like the Adam and the Ants, particularly the late 70s, early 80s kind of sound. That kind of like rough beginnings of new wave when they didn't have the technology to fully realise it. I'm like, man, this sounds really good. And then it kind of turns into attempting Baroque pop, like the Divine Comedy. And Divine Comedy, they're kind of like almost orchestral kind of thing. And I'm like, and at one point I thought that I accidentally jumped ahead in the playlist and I started playing another song. It just felt, it just felt really iffy. And like, and it was like the biggest kind of disappointment because I'm like, oh, can we just have more of the start of the Don't Tread on Me bit? Because that was really nice. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm really nice. And I was like, and it was kind of really gutting. So the one I ended up picking, I picked up the Volbeat version. I
was close.
Yeah. And again, it's mainly because it reminds me of something else. And in this point, it reminds me of if you're a song that you would have released after the Final Countdown. So it has that kind of 80s arena feel to it.
Definitely, that was why I gravitated towards it. Yeah,
and I really quite liked that bit of it. So so I quite like that. So and again, so the first real very very cut down thing, which I think was representative of perhaps they didn't have many people listen to Through the River. So we've got 2 songs from that from The Who and Tommy Ower. He pronounced that Tommy.
I think you're probably right. I think it's Tommy Ower.
Tommy Ower. So so we've only got 2 here, and I think there's a couple of instances where there's not that many, and it's very interesting to use these bits as a comparison to what I think the album could have done a lot more, particularly with its more vast songs. In that they've got a song which has a certain saying to it, and the cover versions, because they're quite limited, are also quite different in comparison to the other ones as well, and they're very different to each other. And it's very interesting, and it's very interesting that you have a very limited palette of genres to choose from. So, like for example, The Who is basically Mongolian metal. It's Mongolian metal, which compared to like an industrial pop of Tommy Ower, which I'll ask you your selection in a second, but I've not listened to them before. Are you familiar with Tommy Ower at all?
Neither person, neither act. Sorry.
But I came in to perhaps investigate it because based on this cover Through the River, they were doing something very similar to what I think Rina Sawayama does in terms of taking a sort of genre and morphing it. So whereas Rina's doing R&B with metal, there was something like very 90s industrial pop. So like if I don't know, Trent Reznor did pop music. That kind of stuff. Which I quite liked as well, which is why I ended up picking that one over The Who. I did quite The Who's not exactly the music I would probably listen to, but I quite liked how fun it was. Whereas I quite liked I think I kind of appreciated the almost Rina Sawayama-ness of the Owu version.
That was in my notes as well, actually, about Tommy Ower's version. I think it could have gone either way. I did pick The Who's version because of the fun, I think. It was just a really go on.
I think it wasn't English, but you know who it reminded me of? Lordi.
Yes,
So Hard Rock Hallelujah so that kind of. I mean, they're not wearing all these masks and stuff but I think looking at on Spotify and the promo pictures, they kind of go for the kind of Mongolian ancestral and kind of look. So they've got like the warrior kind of armor on and stuff, and it just reminds me of that. And it was a tough pick, but so.
I agree completely. It was a tough pick for me as well. Honestly, it could have gone either way because you can't compare them even because they're completely different versions. So yeah, today it's the Who, but tomorrow it could be Tommy Owen. Who knows? Yeah,
but I think it's like the first real example of if a slightly bit more thought was put out on it on some of the more bigger singles to think, hang on, this is how different we should make them at all. You're not going to get issues that we're about to get to, which is because Nothing Else Matters. Then the Nothing Else Matters song, apparently, there are about 11 versions, I think.
God. Yeah.
So we got Phoebe Bridgers, Miley Cyrus featuring Elton John, Yo-Yo Ma, Robert Trujillo, and Chad Smith. Dave Gahan, Mickey Guyton, Dermot Kennedy, Amanda Laferte, Eagle Levitt, My Morning Jacket, PG Roxette, Darius Rucker, Chris Stapleton, and Trezor. Whew.
We're in the eye of the storm now, Matt. Let's go.
Yes. It's all. So we're on track 8. Again, I'll just briefly ask a question about the original one. So Nothing Else Matters, I think, was one of the singles. So I'm assuming it was a big single then.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier about why there are so many versions of this. I think it is one of the ones that people will be more familiar with. So if they're given completely free reign, which I think you're right has probably happened, it's kind of like, I know Nothing Else Matters. Let's do a version of Nothing Else Matters. There's a danger in that, obviously, as maybe has manifested here. Yeah,
I'd be interested to see if I don't know what the band like it. I'd be interested to see if the band hate the song or something, and so just kept getting new versions of it and stuff. But if anyone knows, let me know. But so I'll let you lead on this one.
Okay. I was quite strategic about this, and just sort of my filter was what was a refreshing change to the original heard so often. It was by that I managed to kind of narrow it down to 3 that I loved, and one that I hated. But 3 that I loved was the kind of quieter, more thoughtful end of the takes. It was the Igor Levit classical piano version, Dave Gahan's version, and the one that I eventually picked, which is Phoebe Bridgers' version. Reason I picked that one was that I think the details in that I really, really enjoyed how quiet and kind of understated it was. There's this kind of ballerina toy box effect to the piano at the start, and it's got that kind of pedal sound where it sounds like the piano's underwater, and that's one of my particular favourite sounds ever in music. So for that reason, that was Phoebe's version was the one I went with, and her voice is gorge, obviously. The one that made me angry, My Morning Jacket. Were they trolling or what? What was that? I'll sum up. It sounds very different to the original, but in a kind of happy, jolly country rock way that I did not get whatsoever. I was just listening to it. I think I've kind of listened to the tracks in stretches on walks and things like that. And this was one that made me stop and was like, what the hell is this? Didn't like it at all.
So my pick is My Morning Jacket. No, it's not. It's not. But I think particularly if I get on my playlist, if I get back onto the playlist, I think the My Morning Jacket one, I think it's where it is because there's a point. I think there's a point. You got the Phoebe Bridgers version, which I think is really great. And at the moment, Phoebe Bridgers seems to just be. She can probably cover any song.
Right.
She could probably think of like the most notoriously worst song ever, and she'll probably make cover of it and make it great. So so she could probably I can't think of any crap song at the moment. My mind's gone blank. She could do a cover version of it, and it would be great. Phoebe Bridgers also kind of disc picked all the way back in the third episode. So it was guaranteed to be something really great to listen to. It's not the one I've picked. It's not the one I picked. Again, I think and cleverly it's the first one on there, because you get we'll get currently the kind of sad. She's at the moment the queen of the sad indie world. So they front load this with her as well, and on there, so you're not going to get fatigued, which eventually happens very quickly. It's not my pick, but I'm quite surprised that I like the Miley Cyrus version.
Yeah, that was in my good category.
Yeah, I mean,
her voice is amazing on that, I will say.
You know what? There's been a lot of things said for and against her and stuff, and the one thing that I think looking back now, and again, I think some of the songs she's released and stuff aren't my thing, but I think one of her key strengths is that she's got a very really distinctive voice. Yeah. She's got a very unique voice, which has that kind of country twang to it. Yeah. But works well with pop. Kind of works
and rock.
Well with pop. Yeah, and it just seems to fit. And it's again, I think it works. It'd be interesting to have her pretty much see her kind of perhaps sing over something like the instrumental for the Rina Sawayama version and see how it copes with that. But I think then again though, she has got like a super group of people. Like throughout, she's got like members of, I think, Robert Trujillo, who I did search these and I've forgotten which. Robert Trujillo is from Metallica. I think Chad Smith is the drummer from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Then you've got some pianist called Elton John. Who I think he does do backing vocals. I think, doesn't he?
I think he does.
Because I was expecting him to do either his own chorus, but he doesn't. I'm quite surprised that he's credited and he doesn't have a bigger role vocally. So I'm assuming he's the piano. I'm assuming he's the pianist. I'm not sure who what is, if I'm generally honest, but Yo-Yo Ma had to Google and realise that he's like a very famous cellist who I've never heard of him before, or I might have, but I've never realised before.
Cellist badass Yo-Yo Ma.
Yeah. But I'm assuming there's people yelling at me, listening to this, going, "How do you not know who Yo-Yo Ma is?" I'm like, I don't know.
I'll send you some stuff.
but it works really. It kind of works really well into kind of crafting a kind of orchestral pop version of this song. The piano works well. It works really, really well together. I think it might be. It's probably the biggest surprise on it, I think, because people probably weren't expecting this. I think initially, because of them saying featuring all these people, it probably means people are going to get pretty soon notice who it is. But I'd be interested to find out what would happen if they just said it was Miley Cyrus and no one else.
Yeah,
and then reveal afterwards saying like, "Oh, so what do you think of the Miley Cyrus version?" Well, you do know that Elton John doing the bass on there and stuff, and like, I'm interested to do it that way. And I think from then on, though, I think it kind of suffers from the fact that there's far too many kind of slow singer-songwriter songs, and it kind of drags a bit. And it means like, the I Go Love It version, which it sounds so much like at the place I work at. Sometimes there'll be evenings, and I'll just randomly find on Spotify piano covers. And I'll just play piano covers of pop songs, and it sounds very similar to that. To the point, I think My Morning Jacket, and as much as like it, I think it's a nice change in tempo. It kind of wakes you back up again from like the sad stuff from it. But
that's fair.
The one I picked was the PG Roxette version, which it turns it into a 1980s power ballad. So like Joan Jett or Pat Benatar almost, but as a kind of like pop stuff, and then it kind of vanishes. It kind of vanishes again to fatigue when you've got like Darius Rucker and Chris Stapleton, who's bloody 8.5 minutes long.
Super meh.
Yes, it's like
minutes of meh.
There's about 15. There's 3 songs in 15. Well, 20 minutes, and at that point, I think there've been too many covers of Nothing Else Matters at that point. So
yeah,
and
definitely.
and then moving on to the next song, which is also a very tough choice to pick from, is Of Wolf and Man, which by Goodnight
Yes.
Texas and just Goodnight Texas. This is which again I think is probably like crap. No one's submitted Of Wolf and Man. We need to get someone in quick. Yeah.
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 Let's ring up some people.
So what did you think of this one?
I enjoyed it. I wouldn't have sacked this one from the list. I think, again, it feeds back to my point earlier about how close melodically there are links between metal and folk. And I appreciated it for that reason, really. I thought it was a good old jig.
Good old jig.
And
again, I think as well, it's, again, to use the word again, transformative, because it sounds different from the original, so at least it's not a band attempting just to do another version of Wolf and Man. They are trying to do something different. Because at the moment they need to make an impact. They need to make an impact on it, and I think they do.
Yeah.
So
agree.
So which one of those covers did you pick for your list? The very tough decision. Yeah.
Oh God, it was a tough choice.
I went with Goodnight Texas. So,
I think everything else was meh. Strong meh.
Yeah.
So forgettable that I forgot.
And then we have The God That Failed, which has current indie press kind of starlets, idols, and Imelda May. Again, very similar to I think Through the River, where you only got two versions, two very different versions from each other, to the point where they sound like completely different songs. On first listen, I thought I didn't realise they'd be covering the same song. So which one of these was you?
Again, I think probably like with Through the Never, I would agree with you. I couldn't compare either of them to each other. Imelda May's is an honourable mention for me. I really liked the kind of bluesy angle and the kind of pace that it had. Idols grabbed me and wouldn't let go though. Just the energy of it, I just got pulled with, and it's like, okay. It's kind of like, I'm not a big fan of roller coaster rides, but it's that kind of adrenaline rush that was the reason why I picked their version, because the pace of it is pretty well double time the original, and there's all these kind of thrashing guitars and lots of lovely shouting from Joe, and I dug it. That was my favourite.
I liked both versions of them, both versions. Idols, I've seen videos. I know I've got friends who absolutely love them and have seen them in like small. And I think but I've never really got them. I think I saw their Tiny Desk concert. I think at the NPR Tiny Desk thing they did. And I was like, you can kind of feel the energy of it. And I think particularly this version, I've got a feeling that, and again, I've not listened to what stuff I've listened to is very brief. I'm assuming that what they feel like they sound like live is what they sound like on record as well. And listening to this, I was getting flashbacks of that NPR energy, and as much as I don't think much of them, I do give them credit. They somehow managed to convey some sort of velocity. I do feel that if anyone's at one of their gigs and they're on the front row, that their faces will be melted off just by the sheer force. Sheer force just from his voice alone. He just has this kind of shouty way of performing lyrics and stuff. I think I liked Imelda May versions more. I think it's a lot more in tune to my kind of thing as well. But it's one of these things where like there's not really much between them. I mean, I quite like the Idols. It's like might be one of those occasions where a band I'm a bit meh on, I quite like, but the Imelda May, I think it's got that kind of almost like there's almost like elements of pop melody to it, which makes it nicer to listen to. It just feels it just incorporates and just kind of like it highlights different parts of the original song that just jump out to me. So so that was mine. Definitely. So So we then move to near the end, coming to the close of coming very close to the end of this now. So we've got 2 songs left. So we've got "My Friend of Misery," which is Cherry Glazer, Izia, and Kamasi Washington. So which one of these 3 jumped out to you?
Okay. I liked all 3 of them, so this was one of the tougher ones to pick. With Cherry, an honourable mention was Cherry Glazer. I love the kind of quiet and loud contrasts and the quite angular arrangement of it. And that their kind of music is music that I'd listened to a lot anyway. So I didn't know that before this, and I will check more of their things out. And Izzy's version had that kind of similarly playful and maximal attitude that Rena's cover of Enter Sandman did for me. So I enjoyed it for that reason. I ultimately picked Kamasi Washington's version though. I think it was the most different of the 3. And it felt like a jazz storytelling odyssey. And emotionally to me, it was the most nuanced. It was the biggest arrangement departure from the original, but it was also an odyssey that I was happy to be led on. Roller coaster thing again.
You ever heard of the Scott Bradley's postmodern jukebox? Yeah, where like they'll take something and like they will. And when I'm talking about transformative pieces of work, they go the whole hog, and like you'll see like Smells Like Teen Spirit performed if it was in the 1940s jazz lounge, and like they'll film it as if they're in the jazz lounge, and there's like cellists and like all this kind of stuff. It has that kind of feel to it. They also do kind of like club jazz versions of like Disney cartoons. Like they've got a 1930s like speakeasy version of Darkwing Duck, which is ridiculously interesting. They do stuff like that. Like the Pokemon theme tune is like turned into like a 50s rockabilly skank song. But yeah, I think the one I went to was the Cherry Glazer one. Again, it's got that kind of like bubble grunge kind of vibe. It's pretty much it is my kind of music. It's my kind of sound. As I said earlier, I mean, they're a band that they're constantly being thrown at me on my Discover Weeklies, and I'm pretty sure I might have listened to one of their albums in the past, but I never given them amount of time. It's one of those things that will always show up like you will like these, and I'll just never listen to that much. And like part of me's kick me up the arse to do anything. So. But yeah, I think But if anyone knows anything about my music taste, they probably would have guessed the Cherry Glazer version would be mine. It's got that kind of like pop punky vibe to it that I just really like. So that one gets my pick. So, and we're on the last, of the track listings. Yes,
and there can only be one.
Yeah, the struggle within to pick the cover of The Struggle Within, which is Rodrigo. Yes. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Is it Rodrigo Y or?
You're close. Rodrigo y Gabriela.
Rodrigo y Gabriela. Okay, yeah. It is just a almost like Spanish guitar cover instrumental of The Struggle Within. So, what do you think? Do you think of this one?
I think probably I felt slightly less strongly about it being on than I did the previous kind of one where there was only one, which I've probably forgotten. Thank you. I suppose to do that again, I felt less strongly about this still being okay to be the only one on there as I did with the version of Wolf and Man. But by contrast, I appreciated it being on there, Rodrigo and Gabriela's version. It kind of felt like it knocked some of the edges off the original a bit, but it kept others. So that satisfied me. That kind of kept me happy to hear it, really. Particularly kind of I think it's about a minute 45 in, where it gets a fair bit more metally. And going back to what I said earlier about the spirit of the original, it kind of felt like it kicked in there for me. I didn't necessarily observe it at the start. It kind of felt very polite at the start, and then gradually kind of carried a bit more of that Metallica energy. But I don't want that to do the version in a service because overall I think it did capture that. And I got a sense that you could trust them to be to be faithful to the spirit of Metallica's songs and the spirit of this track, which I thought they were. And apparently they've performed Metallica cover versions in the past, so they're quite experienced in doing it.
I think they've done. They might have done albums and covers. I can't remember which, but I mean, I think it's got that kind of same energy you usually get when the BBC need music to play when England get knocked out of a major competition. So like, when they suddenly realise that they can't keep playing that acoustic cover of In the End that they always do. But then again, they probably would have picked perhaps a more known metal song, I think. But I think it's a weird. I mean, it's got that kind of closer, and it's a nice kind of wind down for the album. I'm surprised they. Again, I say not surprised, but I'm guessing it was a last minute crap. No one's picked Struggle Within, which is why there isn't a vocal cover. It's just more of an instrumental cover. But I think but it's a nice kind of way to relax, and I think a way to kind of wind down from the rest of the album. So which might be the case that I'm assuming that Metallica might have guessed that people will be doing what we're doing and making playlists and like saying, okay, we need to force them to wind down properly, and only gave us that end one. But I think it works well as an album closer for that. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I agree.
And with that, we've now reached the end of the track listing, and we've gone through 12 tracks of Metallica. So,
hooray!
Might be the first episode of the podcast where we've done that. Where we've gone through that. But, so, just to briefly just cover on because we're not talking about the original. So we're not talking about the original album, more or less. So me saying that it sold nearly 17 million units and gone 16 times platinum in the US, it's not really relevant. But it's gone four. It's or the fact that it's gone 4 times platinum in Germany. With 2 million sold and like 1 million sold in Canada and 13 times platinum in Australia, 10 times platinum in New Zealand.
Wow.
So the original is quite. So the original did quite well. I can't find any information on the performance of this cover version, unfortunately. But I think, again, it might just be that it's too early to tell. But again, it being for charity, I don't know whether that means it doesn't get classed. And I don't know whether it means it'll get picked up by any metric. Possibly.
And things.
Then again, the band themselves are pretty much one of the main forces behind it anyway. So it could be just that. I don't know, because it's for charity, you just can't get there. I don't know. If anyone listening knows, feel free to let me know. So I think the way that we usually end the episodes, I think we'll probably do the same thing. Usually I ask if you've ever seen them live, but you've mentioned that you've seen them at Leeds. Is that the only time you ever saw them?
Yeah. So far the only. I would see them again.
No, the next question usually is other albums in the artist discography. I don't. Due to the nature, I don't know if we can answer this question properly because it's a very unique style of album. Unless we just say listen to the original Black album, which I did do that. I did do that because the playlist on Spotify had the original track to break and bookmark individual those, and so I did listen to that. I think at least once. And again, it's perhaps it was okay. It's probably not. It's not again not the type of music I listen to. But do you know of perhaps if anyone kind of likes this kind of thing, where to go next? Are you able to?
Oh, okay. I wouldn't call myself an expert by any means. I know people who are more Metallica fans than I am, and they would probably be the best to signpost. So. I'll defer the decision.
So if anyone's listening, would know where best to go next. So I'm still going to ask. Okay, so as we reach the end, the important question I usually ask at the end of each episode, I'm still going to ask, because I can't remember if I said I was before we started recording. I usually go through, and I can't remember if I told you I was going to ask this or not. At the end of each episode, I ask the guest to pick one song from the album in question to go onto the Spotify playlist. Yeah. And I can't veto.
Right.
I can't veto it. So whatever you say goes. So out of the 12 that you've picked for this. Which one do you think should go on to the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist?
Spotify Hall of Fame. Okay.
I say I don't veto, but the only time I'm going to do this is because you've already picked the 12 for the playlist.
Yeah. But Matt, that's like asking me to sacrifice several of my children.
Yeah. Trust me. I'm sure some parents have children they favour over others. says the person with no kids himself.
Yeah, same. So I think in terms of the one that I was both most impressed by and also the one that I think would be worth keeping on the playlist would be Rina's version of Enter Sandman, Rina Sawayama's version. I think for two reasons. It captures, as I say, the spirit of why the original is so good. And as mentioned before, it's faithful to Rina's own work. And on both of those fronts, I think it's a great introduction to Rina, to Metallica, and to this record.
Yeah, no disagreement from me. I think Rina's version of the song's great. It's a good example of what can potentially be of that. I think he follows the Ghost version as well. So again, it's a good position in the playlist, in the sequencing of it. So yeah, completely no disagreement from me. So Rina Sawayama joins the Playlist Hall of Fame after following Taylor Swift. So, and that's it. We reached the end of our conversation, Kate, and it's been great to go through and pretty much listen to a Metallica album, which I never thought I'd ever do. So, but if people want to find you, or follow your work at Passing Notes, where can they find you?
Absolutely. It is predominantly on Instagram now. If you go to @Passing Notes Project, or one word, no spaces, you'll find us, and you'll find some past interviews. You'll find some previous sections that we've done, which is 5-word review, where I get guests to review different tracks that I set them at random in 5 words or less. And I have bigger plans for it. I'd like it to kind of turn into a place where through music and through the arts, we can talk about issues that are happening in the cultural industries as a whole, and in the music industry as a whole, and just see what better solutions can come up. And I'm massively passionate about that, and it's become a bit of a calling. And yeah, there's going to be for that more of a YouTube presence soon as well.
Yeah, so I think on the day of recording, we're recording this on the 10th of October, which is World Mental Health Day, by the way. So yeah, and I think you just recently released a few hours ago the first of your second series, to give it a better name. I had
Alex, Alexandra Steinacker Clark.
The first one of that, and I think by the time this is out, there'll be a lot more to begin to. If you want to go even further back, you can avoid the one that I'm on, from like.
Don't or not.
Track it down and laugh at me. The Passing Notes Project's a lot of fun. Very diverse in terms of genre and kind of creatives as well. And I think particularly during lockdown, because it was like the start of lockdown last year, it was nice to have like kind of something regular. I think on like Sundays to watch and stuff. So it's great that you're bringing it back. I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes on, how it develops as well. And so please do give Passing Notes a follow. And with that, we are now at the very, very end of our chat, Kate. And I just want to say thank you ever so much for coming on.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun and really, really appreciate it. So, great.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming. Elsewhere on We Made This. Chucky Vision.
I've been on some Chucky forums, and there is a lot of hate about Chucky being woke, having a homosexual agenda, how it's ruined the franchise by making it too gay. And I'm like, really? How can you possibly suggest that it's ruined the franchise by being too gay when Seed of Chucky is a thing?
And even if people, like, I know some people, like, I mean, Seed of Chucky is quite a debatable film, but, like, even Bride is very camp. People should have known the sensibilities of this franchise ages ago.
Free with this month's issue.
The editor, Mark Sutherland, who's a cunt.
A notorious man.
Yeah, he's the man that ran the magazine into the ground. He opens the issue with a really fucking cringy editor's letter.
Oh yeah, he does.
Which says, for the first 8 months of the year, the alternative nation was depressed. UK garage and pop shite was ruling the charts, and our music was being pushed off the airwaves and common room stereos across the land.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, I looked into the alternative music scene of the first 8 months of 2000. Already released that year, there had been Primal Scream's Exterminator, Blood Flowers by The Cure, Suicide Pact You First by Therapy.
Movie-versaries.
The highest grossing film in the case of Avatar. I don't think anybody ever considers it popular, but everybody saw it, which is really weird. It's this strange case of this film that made so much money, pushed special effects forward so much, and it isn't based on any intellectual property. Not directly anyway, but it has zero cultural footprint. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah, apart from the whole visual thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, like it's impossibly mediocre. It is so middle of the road. like it's not even bad enough to be spoken about.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.